Saludos, everybody. I am Casey, and it is a pleasure to have you here. We are going to be going through a series of questions regarding Doctor Who, and breaking down ultimately what the franchise means to me. When and how were you introduced to the franchise? I definitely didn't grow up with the franchise. I was 21 when a friend and I were hanging out, and she suggested I try it because she knew I was very into genre. She selected the Ninth Doctor's story Dalek for me to watch for my first time, and I was pretty into it from the beginning, but not super sold. I did go back from the start of the revival series and rewatched everything from the beginning, just one episode or two a day, and let it gradually grow on me. And this was a few months before the 50th anniversary special, to give you a time frame of when exactly what this was. And went from there. How much of the franchise have you consumed? At time of recording, I've watched the entirety of both the revival series, including, I believe, all of the animated little episodes, the entire original series that is available anyway, since so much of the first two Doctor serials are still missing in action, something I'd point out to when pushing for media preservation. I'm trying to get physical copies of the novelizations of the missing episodes, but even then I don't have many yet. I wouldn't say I've seen all of the mini little webisodes, because there's always 3 or more popping up somehow that I've missed. But I have seen the most recent charity episode, and more on that later, I guess. I have these 2 games on the Switch, but I have not yet had time to play them, and I've seen the entirety of Torchwood, the Sarah Jane Adventures, but not the K9 series just yet. And I've read a few of the comics and listened to a few of the Big Finish productions, but not nearly a fraction of them all. So I would never claim to be a franchise expert, but I'm always interested in what's going on. Specifically, I was really interested in the Time Lord Victorious story, but that feels like it got so convoluted I could not follow it. So, I wish someone would help me understand what the hell was going on there. How would you describe the franchise to someone who knows nothing about Doctor Who? On paper, it's about the Doctor, an alien who, for production's sake, can regenerate into another actor whenever the story calls for it, or an actor decides to leave, or an actor is fired. The Doctor travels in a time and space ship that, for production's sake, originally, and now for iconography's sake, looks like an old-timey police box that is bigger on the inside. He travels with a revolving cast of companions who, more often than not, work to act as both the character the audience can relate to, and act as the Doctor's moral compass and someone to bounce off of. Diving deeper into the series, it was originally created to be edutainment, but quickly shifted into heavier science fiction themes and ethical discussions and kind of futurist ideals, which go hand in hand with the educational aspects. And to circle around to a future question, these ideals have always pushed for a more progressive message, and even while the first Doctor might not seem super woke now, even his companions, his granddaughter Susan included, Ian and Barbara, all of them were pretty radical characters for the time. And in the context of all of those stories. How often do you revisit the franchise? Pretty regularly. I've watched as the series has come out since the 12th Doctor's debut, and I usually rewatch at least one of the Doctor's runs every year. But most recently, I've restarted the revival series in all of the hype for 14 and 15. At time of recording, I am in the middle of Series 4. Who are your favorite franchise aliens? In no particular order because there are so many. The Daleks, the Sontarans, the Autons, the Solarians, the Time Lords, and Alpha Centauri. Who are your favorite doctors? So for this question, we're going to do a tier list. Because it'll let me go into each doctor a little more in-depth and give me a little more nuance. So for this tier list, we are only going to go over doctors that have their own dedicated series or specials. So no War Doctor, no Ruth Doctor, not because they are not valid, just because I don't really feel like I have seen enough of them to talk about them, honestly. Our tiers we have are Superb, Alon-Z, Batty, Cyberman, and Dalek. Let's start with the first Doctor, who is very much represents authority. Time has not necessarily been well to William Hartnell's Doctor. I very much appreciate who he was, but what the Doctor was supposed to be has very, very, very quickly changed. That being said, what he does and what he's supposed to do, and partially David Bradley's interpretation of the Doctor does a lot more to make this interpretation stand out. I find it really funny that this Doctor is also always given this kind of authority, even though by definition he is the youngest. But on our list, we're going to go with B. And honestly, I don't think we're going to get a Doctor who goes much more below B besides Peter Cushing's Doctor. Definitely not in these order of regenerations, but it counts. By my definitions, I've seen both of his movies. If I want Doctor Who in a really bite-sized thing, they're an interpretation, but not my favorite. The second Doctor, Patrick Troughton. The second Doctor is very much one of my favorites, if not my favorite of the classic series Doctors for a variety of reasons. I love how quickly he reinterpreted the character. I very much find his stories memorable. Another amazing Doctor, the third Doctor, Sean Pertwee. John Pertwee. Definitely John, not his son Sean. I think for what he had to deal with, especially in those early years where the TARDIS is stuck on Earth, John really brings a lot to the role. He makes, again, the Doctor very active. Depending on who's writing him in the moment, he's either from the beginning he has a very anti-authority string, although depending on how he is written, it definitely changes. But he's definitely up there for me. The face of classic Doctor Who, the fourth Doctor. I very much love a lot of what's going on around him. I very much love Tom Baker's interpretation, like a lot of people do. I don't love him quite as much as 3, but he's definitely up there. I think he bounces off just about all of his companions very well and in interesting ways. Tom Baker always brings a lot to the role despite the writing. The fifth Doctor, Peter Davison. I think the biggest problem with Peter is he comes after 4. I think he kind of gets bullied around by his companions a little bit. I don't think he bounces off Tegan especially well, especially early on. But I have no problems with Peter Davidson's interpretation or any of his stories particularly. Leaves a less memorable interpretation overall. That being said, Colin Baker's interpretation definitely sticks with you. Definitely not necessarily for the right reasons, though. I said it in a writing I did a very long time ago. I think BBC put all their eggs in the Colin Baker basket and weren't necessarily ready to bet on that basket. And as soon as it looked like it was going sour, they pitched the whole basket out. And his interpretation suffers for that greatly. I would have loved to have seen where it would have continued, and I know I can see that in the Big Finish productions, but I haven't had a chance to dive into those yet. Hopefully, doing this series, I'll force myself to find time to dive into all of those and really get into it more, but right now I'm gonna probably put you over 1 and under 5. And 7. Sylvester McCoy makes me happy. He really makes me happy. Sylvester McCoy makes me happy, and he also brings a gravitas to the role that, or he also brings an underlining menace to the role that everybody likes to talk about. That everybody likes to talk about, that he brings little later on in his interpretation, but goes a long, long way. The 8th Doctor, Paul McGann, of the Monocled Mutineer fame. I should rewatch his series soon. I have a lot... My biggest problem with this interpretation of the Doctor is I don't know what has caused him to hurt so bad. I haven't seen what happened in the Time War to him to make him want to become the War Doctor. Everybody kind of puts a lot of pressure on the War Doctor for being the War Doctor when he was quite literally born into it. The 8th Doctor actively made that choice for the War Doctor, in a way. For himself. He made that decision for himself, but the 8th Doctor made that decision, not the War Doctor. And again, I know there's a lot more of this Doctor that I need to see and read between the Big Finish and all of his books, but I haven't done that yet. So that's on me, but I've loved what I've seen, but I really want to see a lot more before I can really like him. And the 9th Doctor, my first Doctor. I have so much fun with 9 and Christopher Eccleston. I wish the BBC didn't do him so dirty, or I wish he didn't have so many disagreements with the BBC. From what I understand, it was with how the production was ran, but do not quote me on that, please. I love I love how he maintains that eccentricity of the Doctor while bringing him really, lowering down, really making him serious. Really blending both of those elements in a way that we hadn't seen, that at least I don't think we had seen up until this point. All the way at the top of A. Now that being said, 10 is arguably the face of modern Doctor Who. David Tennant is as much of a fan of Doctor Who as if anybody else has put his time into the series, it is David Tennant. I cannot help but love this interpretation. And he goes up with 2. And he goes up with 2 being one of my favorites. And we're going to put 14 up there right now. At the time of recording, I've seen the first 2 specials, and David Tennant plays him exactly the same way he did 10, for better or worse. 14 and 10 are essentially the same character to me in my head right now. I am excited to see that they bring a little more to that and just how the character talks, since he was 13. But overall, he's still very much 10. And 11, as much as I know that a lot of people love 11, I do not as much. A lot of that, I think, is how Stephen Moffat chooses to write his series. And I think that Matt Smith's Doctor really suffers because of that. For so long, it is the Amy and Rory show, and I really enjoy Amy and Rory, but I don't love the Doctor and all of that. He's going to go right above 8. That being said, when it is about the Doctor, I find it to be absolutely fantastic. Peter Capaldi is easily my favorite version of the Doctor in modern Who. Arguably, all of Who would be right up there with Patrick Troughton's version, one or the other. I cannot particularly decide. But those 2 are definitely going to stay up at 1 and 2. I love how Capaldi's Doctor changes over time, that he is definitely gruffer, like Colin Baker's Doctor was early on, but grows substantially as a character and confronts the Doctor's suspected mortality at that time. 13. Unlike a lot of people, I don't have any problems with Jodie Whittaker's interpretation or a lot of Chris Chibnall's writing. From what I understand, is a lot of the backstory that I had come to understand. about Doctor Who from reading the wikis over the last couple of years since I had really, over the last decade since getting into Doctor Who. So I wasn't particularly offended by any revelations during 13's run, and I have no problems with Jodie whatsoever. I think she's just as great as any of some of the greatest Doctors. But for me, she's going to go right under 4. And we've already talked about 14, so jumping right into 15, I don't have much to talk about with you yet. I haven't seen literally anything. I'm very excited to see what you have to bring. I have no idea what Nakuti was going to bring to it. I really hope I am pronouncing your name right. But I'm excited for what we have, what's coming up. So I don't have anywhere to put you on this list at the moment. So I'm not gonna. End of list. Ended party.
Favorite companions?
Maybe I'll do a tier list down the line because there are so many. But my favorites in no particular order would be Jamie and K9, Donna, Martha, Bill, Captain Jack, Rory, Leela, Tegan, Ace, and, of course, Sarah Jane. Although there aren't any companions I particularly and genuinely hate or dislike, putting them on paper, I like all companions that really contrast with the Doctor and kind of push the Doctor a little more.
Pitch a Doctor Who project.
Oof, okay, I'm going to be kind of vague because maybe I can actually pitch something someday. So ideally 3 episodes, 2 Doctors minimum, 3 if we can afford it. I am pitching for whatever the most recent series is, so the most recent Doctor with companions. If I had to pick for the second Doctor, it would be the 8th Doctor, because I always want to see more of Paul McGann's Doctor and more of what have driven him to choose to become the War Doctor. And I'll take any others that we can afford and are available and aren't begrudged by the BBC. Quick pitch for the first episode. The current Doctor saves this new alien world, this new alien planet from war, the planet's inhabitants, plus the Earth Empire against the Cybermen and the Cyber Wars. I really kind of want to see a little more of the Cyber Wars. That's really interesting to me. I also want to bring back the cloning tech from the Doctor's daughter as a bit of a callback. I think that can be used in a lot of interesting ways. But as the Doctor sometimes does, he promises to come back and check in and continue to help, and the TARDIS takes him away, and that's the end of the episode. Episode 2 would open on the 8th Doctor arriving on the same planet much later. He's never seen it before. It's entirely his story, this episode. It's kind of a pocket episode. He just introduces himself, and whom bom bom, it's the Sontarans. There's no Earth Empire, no Cybermen, no other alien inhabitants, just the Sontarans preparing for a full-scale intergalactic war. Their first real preparations to leave for war. The episode would end with the Doctor escaping captivity and running into the current Doctor and co. as they finally get back to returning. Episode 3 would be the pair of the Doctor saving the day. There would be emotional reveals, and I don't want to spoil.
Spoilers.
What do you think of the most recent series controversy?
At time of recording, that would probably be Davros's redesign, and the fact that some people disagree with the reasoning of the redesign. That crippled villain somehow doesn't perpetuate harmful stereotypes. I generally don't want to hear anyone's opinion on whether or not something is or is not offensive unless they're a member of the offended party. No able-bodied person, myself included, will ever know the experience of anyone disabled unless we become so. Also, you can't really speak for the original creators' intent or what the original creators wanted. The best you can say is that you don't believe it was intended to be offensive, which I also don't believe it was intended to be offensive. And I am of the belief that if something was not intended to lead to a correlation, that it can still lead to a harmful correlation, i.e., this crippled person is angry, crippled person does evil science, crippled people are evil. That is not a jump I would make, but I don't trust everybody not to make that jump. And I think Doctor Who is a series fraught with retcons and redesigns and reinventions, so this isn't anything I think is particularly new for the series.
What do you think the Doctor means to others?
The Doctor clearly means a lot of different things to different people. To a subset, he appears to just be a good masculine role model, and can only be a masculine role model if the Doctor is presenting male. I believe what the Doctor represents, though, is kind of changed, and I think a lot of people have seen that. Sometimes he is an authority, sometimes he is very clearly anti-authority. Sometimes he is both at the same time.
I believe I would, if only to get away from people like you.
Doctor?
And your petty obsessions. England for the English, good heavens, man. I have a duty to my country, not to the world.
The Brigadier is doing his best to cope with an almost impossible situation. And since he is your superior officer, you might at least show him a little respect.
So many people have had their hands in the series that he can't just represent one thing anymore.
What does Doctor Who mean to you?
This is framed around the series and not just the Doctor in general. For context, the entirety of Doctor Who is a really big topic, but narrowing it down, the series is about a better future. We're always trying for a better future. It's inventive and kind, and the characters grow constantly as they learn, and at the same time, the show can be equally terrifying. Its creatures are both unique, and they act as reflections on our own world. While the series itself is always felt of a lower budget to contemporary American productions, the effort and heart put into the series has always been pretty consistent. It feels like the BBC cares about the franchise more than just a cash revenue, or at least the individual showrunners do. Even if I don't love each and every iteration of the Doctor, I, at the very least, enjoy and respect it.